Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So tell me, if you're watching or listening, if you've ever had this happen, you're talking with somebody about personality types and you're explaining it and you're doing a great job. Maybe you're explaining this to a friend of yours and you're explaining the ESFJ type and you're like, ESFJs are amazing. They have a driver cognitive function. We call it harmony. Extroverted feeling is its technical name. Harmony. What a beautiful word, right? This is what this function, this driver function for ESFJs wants. It wants people to be in harmony with each other, to be connected, to have higher ideals and have a cohesive group and get along, right? And you're explaining this maybe to your friend and your friend goes, yeah, but I have an ESFJ brother, sister, cousin, friend of my own. They don't do harmony at all. In fact, this person creates drama, spreads rumors, sometimes will lie and manipulate. In fact, they create discord in their life. So maybe either I misunderstand the function or maybe this person actually isn't an ESFJ.
Yep.
I'm sure if you're watching or listening, you've had this happen at one point. I know you've had this happen, Antonia.
Yeah, this is a weekly, if not daily occurrence for me, describing functions and type.
So you describe, so there's 8 mental processes or what we technically call cognitive functions of personality. 4 are perceiving functions, taking information in and learning. 4 are decision-making, right? Judging the criteria you take in.
Yep.
Our personality tells us which 2 of those we prefer. That's the basics of what personality tells us.
Yep.
And as we explain this to people, what you're reporting to me, Antonia, is you try to explain the qualitative nature of maybe that decision-making, extroverted feeling or harmony. You say, here's how harmony makes decisions. It's looking to create harmony through its decision-making. And the person tells you.
Yeah. Nope. Well, what will happen, and I see this most in 2 contexts. One, when the person is really trying to figure out the system.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking up descriptions of a function and they're trying to, sort of do the math of who in their life, with extroverted feeling or harmony, who in their life has FJ preferences, particularly EFJ preferences. And well, that person, and then they're all the characteristics you just described. So like you said, they're like, well, I either don't understand it or there's something like the math's not working out.
Usually they say that person can't be that type.
Yeah, that person can't be that type.
They dismiss them.
Exactly. And that's actually the second context is when a person is trying to discover their own best fit type or somebody else's. And I see this a lot of time with particularly extroverted thinking or effectiveness. A person is profiled as somebody with, say, ETJ preferences, and they go, well, I can't be an ETJ. I'm not into money. Right. And so there's like this very reduced concept of the function. And particularly when it's being described, there's a disconnect between the function and how the person is understanding how it plays out in real life.
Yes.
And this comes up a lot in Profiler training, the program that we teach the system through. But I think it happens all over the place. And the challenge with this is, number one, I think people get they get confused by the functions, and then they start seeing them. They miss markers of the function and start applying it to other functions, and then they get a kind of an imperfect understanding of how the functions work.
Yes.
And so that makes it harder to observe, like say in a profiling session or just, out and about. So that's the first thing. And then the second is they start mistyping people because people are not showing up with these predictable characteristics that are supposed to be aligned with their preferred functions.
Yes.
And so then they just, it's like it just kind of throws them off the trail.
Yes.
So particularly for people who are trying to figure the system out, there's a way to make this not be, like a red herring, right? Because this can be such a red herring when you're trying to learn type and functions. Yeah. There are ways of looking at it and thinking about it and kind of basically going well, why? Answering the question, why is this the case? Why does this happen? Yeah. I think is really helpful when a person is trying to nail down an understanding of the system. So
let me just kind of play with this a little bit more before we go into the serious answers. So again, the thinking is well, somebody has ESFP preferences, let's say. Well, that means they have a driver, dominant cognitive function of extroverted sensation. Mm-hmm. And we know sensation's all about being in the present moment, being in touch with your body and what's happening. We would assume it's got characteristics of coordination and quick response times. And you might have a friend who, typed out or profiled out as an ESFP, and you're like, well, they're clumsy. They're sluggish and slow. Sometimes they're not tuned into the present moment. They can't be an ESFP.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, check, not ESFP. Like, and you just dismiss it. Or maybe you have a friend who you would think they have ITP preferences, maybe INTP preferences, but this person keeps lying all the time to you and others. And you're like, well, this person clearly can't be using the cognitive function of introverted thinking or accuracy. They're being inaccurate all the time.
Or their logic is specious.
Like, clearly this person can't be an INTP. They don't have clean thinking around something.
Right.
So out. Nope. Uncheck it. They're not
Exactly.
that. So this is what we're talking about. Maybe there's an ESTJ. You think you've profiled or typed somebody that's ESTJ, but they're destructive or they don't manage people very well. They're not a good manager. Well, they can't be. Every ESTJ is an amazing manager with that extroverted thinking or effectiveness as their driver.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly they're not an ESTJ, or maybe it's an extroverted intuition exploration driver, ENTP or ENFP, like you or me, Antonia. That's not real creative, doesn't come up with a lot of good ideas, kind of just likes to do their work day in and day out and doesn't go off script all the time. Well, clearly that person's not an extroverted intuitive exploration user.
Yep.
Right? They can't, or possibly an INTJ or INFJ that doesn't have deep insights. Well, they're not an NI user, perspectives. Right. We dismiss so many things because it doesn't match up with the very limited stereotypical view we have of that cognitive function. We just go, they can't be that function. It's ruled out.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's definitely a piece here, and I believe we recently recorded a podcast that talked about personality types you hate, and that a lot of times when we are thinking about personality type, we're thinking about like an individual that's the representative in our head of that type.
Yes.
And so we get a very narrow view of how a type can look. And I think when you're talking about, somebody, like that person can't be, say, an ENP because they're not this Joker like chaos agent or whatever.
Yeah.
Oftentimes that's not just a misunderstanding of the function. It's also that the person's not parsing their, the stereotype in their head. They can't reconcile the stereotype in their head. The one person who represents this type, whether it's a fictional character or a real person in their life, and with this other individual. So therefore it can't be the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think this, what I'm talking about particularly comes up when a person's trying to learn the system. Yeah. Not when they believe they have already mastered it, right? A lot of times what you're talking about is that's the product of an individual studying the functions enough to become the expert in their life around the topic. And that's a dangerous place to be. That's why it's really important to be part of a community of people who are into type, so that you are not you're not the expert in the room all the time.
You don't get weird. And
you don't get weird around it. Like, I've figured type out because I'm the only person I know that's into it. And I've watched a gajillion YouTube videos and, read a couple books and, read a lot of, Tumblr posts or whatever. And so therefore I know type and you can't be XYZ.
Closed system versus open system.
Yes, exactly.
You're in a closed learning system there, whereas a community is an open learning system.
Yes. And you will, if you're especially part of the right communities, everybody's trying to learn and refine their understanding. And so you get a lot of feedback. Like you might not really actually understand type as well as you think you do, especially if you have an entirely theoretical understanding of it.
Yeah.
So a community helps you get a more practical, applied understanding because you're actually talking to real human beings. So I'm not really talking about that challenge, although that of course is a challenge in and of itself. I'm more talking about when a person is like legitimately trying to figure out the system and they're running into these problems with people not matching up to the descriptions of the functions. So I've written down like 4 or 5 reasons I think this happens a lot. So getting into the serious part where we actually do the talking of the subject, I want to go through these. I have quick bullet notes that I think that we could fillet out. But I think if you can figure this piece out, if you can I think it saves a lot of time and trouble. This probably, hopefully, fingers crossed, somebody will listen to this and it will save them like months worth of trying to do the math in their head. Because it's actually not that difficult. You just kind of have to understand how these things thread together.
Yeah.
So it's more principle based than it is like, here's how this function specifically works in all contexts. It's kind of more like get these principles laid down
Yeah.
then go learn about the functions and then try to match them to people in your life and see if these principles don't allow that, that connection to happen a little easier.
Yeah. One way, I don't know, I actually haven't seen your list.
Yeah.
Somebody riffing along with you as you do this. One of the ways I've started to think about cognitive functions as I approach them, having done this for a long time now, is they're kind of like the raw materials or the building blocks, right? Like our daughter Piper this morning, we were learning about money and how before 1965, the United States, our coins, like quarters in the United States, used to have real silver in them. And after 1965, we started using like copper, nickel, and other metals in the coins. And I think in terms of, well, it's still a quarter, but the raw material is different now. Like a quarter can be made out of like actual piece of silver, like 90% silver, or it can be made out of other materials. But the end result is a quarter. And if you look at cognitive functions this way, the end result is the behavior we see, right? That's like the quarter. It's like the final deliverable of it. But that could be made up of a lot of different materials. Like that behavior could come from a lot of different sources and a lot of different raw materials. Like we're just looking at that behavior and we're saying it would be as inappropriate to apply silver to every quarter I see as it would be to apply any cognitive function to every behavior I see. Because there's not silver in every quarter. Yeah, it's still a quarter. Well, that means it's got silver in it, right? Nope, not if it's after 1965.
Right.
So I think this is a good way to start thinking about this is what are the ingredients going into this behavior? That's the cognition behind the scenes, right? So that's like the meta frame I come from as we go into the things you want to talk about and walk through. That's how I've started to bring this up when I'm working with clients or I'm teaching or anything I'm doing personally. That's kind of the little trim tab I have in the back of my head.
What a great analogy. I hadn't heard that one yet. And so I think that's a great one for understanding type, meaning that and we say this in profile training all the time, you can observe the behavior, but it's not what they're doing, it's why they're doing what they're doing.
That's right.
Right. What are, like you said, what are the materials in it? Because all of us are humans humaning.
Yeah.
Like we're all doing basic human stuff. So, playing with your kids isn't type based. Playing with your kids is like animal based. All right. That all like mammals do that.
Yeah.
So I'm a mammal, so I'm going to play with my kids. Right. It's more, it's not what I'm doing necessarily, especially if I'm doing very basic human things.
Yep.
It's why I'm doing what I'm doing and how I'm going about it. And what
Yes.
are my limitations and what is the direction I'm going to tend to go in. Those are the things that are informative.
So I think what we're trying to get you, if you're watching or listening, to do is disconnect when you quote unquote see a quarter. Oh, that has silver in it, right? Metaphorically speaking, like disconnect those things. When you see a behavior, don't go, oh, that person's a good dancer. They use extroverted sensing or sensation. They must, because that's who's good dancing, right? Extroverted sensing sensation. We know that's the function of dancing and physicality.
Right.
That's just as inappropriate as saying every quarter has silver in it.
Yep, exactly.
So let's go into your list. What do you have for us?
But that said, there is something to be said for some of those stereotypes, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so the first thing that I wrote down
they still color quarter silver on the outside.
They do.
Even though it's not real silver.
Yeah.
So there is something to be said for stereotypes.
There is something to be said for them. All right, so the first thing that a person has to really get down when they're trying to understand how type works is separate the function from the user. When you're understanding functions, you have to realize that you are learning them in a silo. There are certain characteristics and qualities that each of the functions possess, right? We talk about them particularly like in our personal life path program. We talk about them as sort of occupying a slice of reality or slice of life, sort of an energetic slice of life. So they're actually massive. If you think about how much territory each function can potentially take in, because we're effectively mapping all of reality with 8 functions.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. We're talking about like everything that can be consumed by the brain and understood by the brain is pared down to 8 different functions. So we're talking about like literally everything. So if that's the case, then we don't want to make these categories too narrow, because the categories aren't narrow. They're occupying a huge spectrum of life. So remember not to oversimplify the functions, even though you do have to learn them slowly over time. And that means you want to find like sort of the base, the foundation. I like to think about things in terms of the nucleus. What's at the center? What's the fundamental thing that the function is trying to accomplish?
Yes.
What are the base principles of how it works? So you want to get the building blocks of them. But you also have to remember that they'll never exist that way in reality.
Yeah.
That is an entirely theoretical concept of understanding the functions as a description in and of themselves. They'll never be represented that way in play, in practice, or application.
Absolutely. In fact, to such a degree that in the PLP, our Life Path Mentorship, we do a lot of work with clients and students to actually get rid of some of the distinctions, weirdly enough, in order to make it even more broad. So we'll bring sensing, extroverted sensing, right? Sensation, and introverted sensing, memory. We'll actually bring those together and say, don't even worry about the attitude of these, whether it's pointed outwardly or inwardly. Let's just talk about sensing in general. What does sensing cover in its totality? What is it focused on? It's got a lot of things it takes in territory-wise, regardless of its attitude of how it's applied. Now, we as humans from our personality will bring it in-house and we will apply it in a certain fashion, right? I have introverted sensing as one of my higher up functions that I can access. And so I have more of a preference, I guess, for that over extroverted sensing, but I'm still activating sensing in general. I have to do both of these things in the equation, right? Both sides of it.
Exactly.
So we work with clients to almost get rid of the distinction at first to help them understand like, oh no, there's a lot of territory this covers. And so you could, in a way, and we have, boil this down to 4 primary cognitive functions.
Yeah.
Sensing, intuition, feeling, and thinking.
And that's how Jungians think about it, actually.
Exactly.
Right. The attitudes are there to understand our relationship to it. But yeah, you could basically pare it down to those 4. Now, in Personality Life Path, we do a little of both.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said for not creating too narrow definitions. So regardless, though, no matter how clean you slice it, there's still going to be an entirely theoretical aspect to defining a function, because it's not really something. I mean, we're trying to put language to experience. We're trying to put language to basically something that is so, it's so fish and water, right? It's
subjective experience.
It's so subjective.
My self-reported subjective experience. I'm trying to create a map that I can be interoperable with you and have shared language so we can both understand our own inner experience of the reality we engage with.
Exactly.
And that we're wired differently, right?
And it becomes a mosaic. It becomes like everybody's communication about how this thing works for them once they kind of understand what it is. I mean, so it's almost like it has to keep evolving.
Yeah.
So the very first principle when you're learning type is don't mistake the function for the person using it, because the function and as it's being described is by definition entirely conceptual. It's entirely theoretical as it's being described. Now, it can be explained in ways that, I mean, you can give examples, right? Like, can you give me an example of what that might look like? And examples now bring it into a little bit more, reality. This is what it looks like when played out. This is what it looks like within an individual. This is what it looks like when it's, there's lots of different ways to create examples around them. But the function itself, when you say, extroverted feeling, we call it harmony because that's what it fundamentally wants. Like all of that is actually misleading language. Yeah. Even though it's one of the easiest ways to understand functions, it's still misleading. The function doesn't want anything. It's not a thing. It's not a person. It has no motivation or intent. But at the same time, it kind of does because there's an energy towards something. It's almost like life wants to live is another way of saying something similar. And it's like, does life want to live? Does it have intent? And it's like, well, yeah, it does because it grows everywhere. So obviously life wants to live. But beyond that, it's not like it's a person with will, right? Yes. It's just a thing that is emerging and you can't stop it. So functions they're sort of similar. They want things in the same way that, like life wants to live.
Yeah.
They're focused on a certain field of reality, and that field of reality has properties that emerge more of itself, basically.
Yes. So tuning into this, just going to give another example. It would be like trying to explain love to somebody. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we can almost all agree that love exists. We all have a varied definition of it, but we kind of have a sort of subjective agreement on what we all perceive to be love. And to explain it, you almost have to do it through examples. Mm-hmm. Well, I brought you coffee this morning, so it shows love. It's demonstrated, right? You try to give examples because it's such an abstract concept. And people sometimes have really interesting applications of how they wire giving and receiving love. So we have to use examples, and sometimes those aren't always like the intent to feel love is there, but the behavior may not actually get what the intent is desiring.
Mm-hmm.
So not all behaviors are acts of love, even if they're attempting to get love through that behavior. Right. So we could also look at functions. I think what you're basically trying to say is these are theoretical in nature.
Mm-hmm.
We can only understand them by seeing examples. They're nebulous at best. They're never going to bear out in reality in the way they're described in theory, because
Mm-hmm.
these are tidy, nice little theories, and humans are complex meat machines, right?
Yeah.
We're like real organic tissue, and we're not tidy like theories are.
Right. And we have to start, we learn type by siloing the descriptions of the functions.
Yes.
I think that's kind of what it comes down to, is that the reason why it will never bear out in reality the way that we describe it is because it does not exist in a silo ever.
Yeah. Okay. So like learning love, we learn how love works from our family. Usually it's very simplistic. When you're a child, you're drawing big hearts and little like big characters and I love yous and all this. And then as we grow up, we get more sophisticated around our concepts of love. We have to almost oversimplify it to its inaccuracies.
Yeah.
And make it a little kiddish to understand it.
Yes.
And then as we grow and mature, we can make it more sophisticated, more adult-like, if you will.
Exactly. So, that's the first principle. The way one must learn it is by definition how it will never show up. Does that make sense? Like it will never show up all by itself. It will always be in conjunction with another thing.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the second piece, which is that functions always exist in a system. So a type is the description of a system of functions. Somebody with ENTP preferences, I use extroverted intuition or exploration as my dominant or driver function, but I'm always going to be using it in conjunction with all my other preferred functions of introverted thinking accuracy, extroverted feeling harmony, and introverted sensing memory in descending order of preference. You also share extroverted intuition or exploration as your dominant or driver function, but you're pairing it with totally different functions than I am. And so it's going to show up differently for you than it will for me. Now, add on top of that, and we understand things more like analytic versus holistic functions. So there's like different ways that functions can show up just in their own nature. So you have a different style of extroverted intuition or exploration than I do, which also changes it.
Yeah.
So you're using different functions. You have a different preference for how those functions show up. And you're also a different human being with a different series of lived experiences than I am.
Yeah.
So all of that's going to come into how extroverted intuition or exploration shows up for you, different than mine. So each function lives in a system, not just in a system of its own personality type exploration, but a system of a human, right? There's a bunch of different things that influence how we show up as people. So when we're trying to understand functions, when we say things like, well, you're describing extroverted feeling or harmony as something that, wants to be connected with others, but it's not showing up the way that you're describing it in my EFJ coworker, sibling, whatever, right? Family member, friend, or whatever. That doesn't mean that the description of the function is inaccurate. And it doesn't mean that your family member, friend, coworker, whatever is not a person of that type. It means that there's an alchemical response from that person and how they are responding, reacting with that function. Like we're informed by our functions and we're informing our functions.
Yeah.
It's both. It's like we both influence and are influenced by them. So this person who's showing up as a drama queen, it doesn't mean that they're not using extroverted feeling or harmony. And it doesn't mean that a description of extroverted or harmony as something that wants people to, wants to get people's needs met and wants us to be in cooperation and build trust and all that stuff. It doesn't mean that that's inaccurate. It means that there is missing information. And so that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the missing information. You're not looking to just assume that something's wrong or off with the system.
At the risk of going head to head with a introverted thinking accuracy user here, so I'm deeply uncertain about what I'm about to do. I actually saw two things you just brought up there, and they're the same category.
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can create a distinction. I'm not even an accuracy user. Let's see how well I do. The first thing you said was you will never, I don't know exactly the words, so you can quabble about that, but I'll just say my understanding is you're not going to see a function outside of a system running. Basically, you're not going to just see the function in its isolation. You're always going to see it in a personality with somebody.
Well, I mean, it's not going to exist
Yes.
outside of a system.
Well,
Yeah.
and someone might say, yes, it can. Okay. Well, let's say this. Anytime you're going to notice it existing, it's going to be in a system or a personality.
Yes.
Like maybe there's a philosophical thing, a little devil's advocate side of me wants to say. But let's just say this. Yes, you could see a catalytic converter from a car or a gas tank or a spark plugs or something. Yeah, they exist outside of the engine, but functionally they don't.
Right.
I mean, they can't do anything unless they're in the engine of the car operating with the other parts of the engine systemically to make something happen.
Right.
So what you're saying, the first part of what you're saying then is cognitive functions are systemic by nature.
Mm-hmm.
They can't live outside of a system. They have to be inside of a system, just like a car part, in order to be activated.
Yep.
The second thing you talked about was this notion of humans now. We're not all the same and we're pulling on our functions. And the reason I say there's distinction there is because, well, let's say the engines are the exact same construction with the exact same parts. But we know, Antonia, through client work, that we don't get the same result. So there's other factors going on, not just the functions and assembly of a system. There's other factors going into that system besides just the functions themselves. Was that confusing? Probably was.
No. I mean, I kept up. Yeah, like the same spark plugs could be going into lots of different cars.
Trucks, cars, tractor trailers,
Right.
little lawnmowers, who knows?
Yep.
Right? All sorts of different applications.
Yep.
And so we could say that you and I share a windshield.
Yeah.
The windshield of our car is extroverted intuition, exploration. We look out a very similar windshield.
Yeah.
Now, yours might be dirtier than mine, but I'm just kidding. But the point is, qualitatively, it's roughly about the same. But the engine that drives us is very different. Our judging functions are different.
Right.
You use accuracy, introverted thinking. I use authenticity, introverted feeling as our primary way to decide what to do.
Yeah. And that definitely changes the game. We're definitely in two different quote unquote automobiles for sure. So that's I think it's really important to remember that. And it's important to remember that, as I said before, we're influenced by the function, but we're also influencing the function.
Yeah.
It's not a one-way street. And I think that this is actually maybe core, because I think when we first learn type, we get this sense that we are being influenced by the function, and then that it's a one-way street. Like the individual is almost obeying the function. The function wants this. It's focused towards it. It has intent towards it. And so I'm going to be I'm in service to the direction this function is pointing me towards.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a one-way street. I don't think we obey our type. I think our type can sometimes get us in a grip. And I think sometimes we can have a complex around our type or aspects of our type. If we have a complex, and that's a whole different can of Jungian worms. But if we have a complex, it means that anytime we have a complex that's like encouraging us to show up and act in a certain way, that means that there's more going on than just the function existing. It means that there's a bunch of like unprocessed material that probably needs attention. So it actually indicates something that's off or wrong. But we should not be obeying our type, our personality type structure. And when I say we influence it, meaning that we color and alter the flavoring of this function in the same way that, like, a bunch of people might have the same iPhone, but they all have different cases and they've all like put, different stuff on them, or like, it's like anything that we personalize, anything that we tailor to ourselves, anything that's like part of us that we've like sort of carved out a special little way that it shows up for us with individuality.
Yes.
The same thing applies to functions.
This gave me the thought that there are new applications and new ways of using cognitive functions that haven't been done yet.
Yeah.
Basically, you might be listening or watching right now as a certain personality type, being tuned into the cognition of your mind, your perceiving and judging functions. You might be the first person to do something with these functions that has ever existed, right? I don't think it's not like we've mapped the full complexity of each one of these 8 functions in all of its totality. Like Jung started this back over 100 years ago. It's not complete. Yeah. We're still figuring out what is the full capacity of each of these. What can it actually do? What can it actually attune to? What kind of decisions can it make? What kind of perception can it take in?
Yeah.
I don't think we've hit the limits of that. I don't think we've even scratched the surface of this. We just have kind of a working theory of it at this point. We don't have tools that measure it yet. We're still developing those. Like we're working with EEG reading with Dr. Dario Nardi and Darren Yee, who's also working with us now on the team. And we're going around and we're doing brain imaging with certain cognition to see if it matches up with type and functions. And so we're working on developing some of these measuring tools as humans, but we don't have them yet. So I guess I never really thought of that until this episode right now. Like, I think we think, oh, this is like the world. We've explored the entire planet. We have a map for the whole thing, right? We don't have a photograph of every blade of grass, but we know the whole planet. We know where the oceans are, where all the mountains are. We know the basic building blocks of the entire space, and we can prove it through satellite imagery. We know we're right. We've got the measurements to prove it. We didn't have measurements in the past, but we still were right over time. We just tested and made it up. I don't think we've mapped all these functions fully.
Yeah.
Not in their totality.
Yeah. Well, because there's as much variance in how functions show up and how they're used as there are in individuals.
That's right.
That exist.
That's right.
And so, because we're all going to color them a little different. So, it doesn't mean that there's no value in having. I mean, there's a value in the oversimplification because that's kind of the point of type. The point of type is to map out the human psyche in a way that, and this goes back to early episodes we did many, many years ago about how like the map is not the territory.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're basically saying the same thing, but going the opposite direction. It's like, remember, this is a map. It's not the territory. It's not the specifics, or it's not how it's being applied or lived, but there's still value in maps. And at the same time, just remember it's a map, right? It's a description of something that actually ends up becoming very individualized when a person is using it. That doesn't mean that it can't be observed. It doesn't mean that it can't be traced. We do profiling all the time. Like there are predictable ways that these things show up. It's just not going to be in the way that your brain has maybe created an image around it. So expand your image, right? Expand how much variance you think is in each of these things, which leads me to my next point, and that is in terms of development. So one of the reasons why we get really confused around descriptions of functions that don't quite parse out how an individual is using them is when we don't take development into account. And I don't just mean development over time with maturity and age. I mean like the health of the individual. An unhealthy individual is not going to suddenly use all their functions in a healthy way. It's not like functions themselves have health written into them. So if the user is an unhealthy person in whatever way, or their psyche, like if their psyche is not performing at its healthiest, then their functions are not going to be able to do it either. It's not like the functions suddenly do the heavy lift. They're going to be filtering all of that through their functions as well. And so their functions are going to take on an unhealthy quality. So there's both health and lack of health. And then there's developmental levels. And those are two slightly different things. So when somebody says this person who's using extroverted feeling or harmony is not creating harmony, they're creating drama, my brain goes, well, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So the way that you can figure out a function when it's not being used in a healthy way, and they're described in a neutral way, usually neutral to healthy, because we want to not, we don't want to put a negative imprint on somebody's understanding of type when they're first learning. So it tends to be neutral towards to positive descriptions, but it really they're actually neutral. In reality, they're neutral. Functions are neutral. They're just like neutral ways of engaging with the world. And so when a person is using a function in an unhealthy way, what you have to look for is what's going on with the function on a nucleus level, and why does it make sense that if it were to go off the rails, it would be going off the rails in that way? So to me, it makes sense that harmony and discord or drama are actually two sides of the same coin. Because what you're really talking about, and the nucleus of extroverted feeling or harmony, is human to human rapport. You're talking about the energetic interchange between two humans or a group of humans, or maybe humanity, right, in total. So if it's really about the rapport, the energy that I'm sending you and you're sending me back, and I can't figure out how to do that in a positive way. I can't create harmonious, positive rapport because there's something messed up with me. There's something going on with me where I just can't seem to get there. But I'm still leading with extroverted feeling, the function that craves rapport. Like the function itself wants to be in rapport. That's what's interesting to it. So if I can't seem to create harmony, well, I'm going to try to get that rapport anywhere, any way that I can. And drama takes me there, right? What is drama? Drama is when a bunch of people are paying attention to each other. They're in some sort of energetic rapport. It just happens to be that is, it's leading to a feeling of ick. It's leading to bad feelings as opposed to good feelings. It's making people feel upset as opposed to making them feel happy and building trust. But it's still rapport, right? That's still the nucleus. It's still
engagement.
It's still engagement. Yep. Exactly. And so it makes sense that extroverted feeling or harmony, when it's not healthy, is creating drama because it still wants the engagement. Introverted thinking or accuracy isn't creating drama when it's unhealthy. When introverted thinking or accuracy is unhealthy, it's doing the opposite of what the function's desire. The function's desire in and of itself is to be as close to truth as humanly possible. How do I get as close to what makes logical sense as humanly possible? And not be married to it, right? Not be married to the outcome. Well, if I can't, I'm still going to be thinking, trying to create reason and try to figure things out and how they work. But if for some reason that the healthy version is being disrupted, what's it going to end up in? It's going to end up in deception. It's going to end up in self-deception. It's going to end up in, it's still cold and distant from other people. But as opposed to being radically honest, it's going to be, it's going to use the same mechanisms of, being able to create reason to instead of rationalize, right? It's actually going to probably be even more off the rails.
So for those two functions, for example, we could have called it connection for harmony, or we could have called it rationale for introverted thinking or accuracy.
Or logic or something.
But I think what we chose are the qualitative positive desires or the ways to attune this. Ultimately everybody feels better if extroverted feeling is trying to create harmony and not just starting fights or drama.
Right.
And when introverted thinking or accuracy is accurate and honest and really looking at the accurate logic of something, everybody feels relief and enjoys that better.
Yeah.
So we put the qualitative nature, the best way we think these can show up. Introverted feeling, we nickname it authenticity. What's really being in touch with your subjective human experience, right? And the idea is that you can be authentic through that and not manipulate or be two-faced, but be your authentic express self, no matter who that is. That's the desire we want for it. That's why we gave it that name. But I guess you could just say in resonance, we could have labeled it that. Right. But that's way more neutral than authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. And it can be very duplicitous, not self-deception in the same way that introverted thinking is, but more like, well, I get to be whoever I want to be to get what I want.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to figuring out who you are when you see so many parts of yourself.
Effectiveness is trying to be effective. Extroverted thinking, used by TJs, the outcome is an effective outcome, not just any outcome. I want it to be effective. I want it to be useful. I want it to be good. I want it to be high quality.
Yeah.
A good, a good end point or good end result to this.
Yep.
I guess we could have labeled it something like resource or, energy management or something in the outer world. I guess not energy management. We could have labeled it something more low level, but we're trying to put these labels on these that encourage or inspire a vision of what it can be.
Yes, exactly. Whereas with extroverted thinking, it understands resource, like it's honed in on resource, which can be progress or it can be destruction, right? Plenty of extroverted thinking, users are actually kind of fascinated with the idea of destruction, right?
Yeah,
like what
happens. Does demolition.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but the point of all of that is there's the person using it in the same way that we say it's always working in a system and it's not separate from the user. The individual themselves will be bringing a lot, they'll be expressing themselves through these functions. And the functions will be influencing them to be focused on certain things that they're pre-wired to be fascinated by. But it doesn't mean that that it's always going to be good news. And it's not like suddenly discovering your type makes you a healthier person. It just gives you now, like Dario, our friend Dario says, it doesn't do the work for you. It'll tell you what work you need to do, but it won't do it for you. So that's the other, that I think that's an important principle to remember, is that when you're learning how functions work and you're learning type, when you can get to that place where you're looking at what the nucleus of each function is, the real nucleus, like what's really going on here? Is it getting people's needs met? No, it's staying in rapport with humans. That's really what it is at the foundational level. It's like it's energetic interchange between humans is extroverted feeling. Well, how many different ways can that go? It can go a lot of different ways. And drama is one of them. So it's like that's what you're looking for. You're looking for those foundational principles.
I know people, and I'm not going to mention any names, but everybody's going to know what I'm talking about. There are some people who are so connected to like political entities, people, they're just caught up in it. And even if it's negative, they just want to be caught up in it, right? Mm-hmm. Celebrities, politicians, like the haters, quote unquote, that are like so obsessed with this person that's the bad politician or the bad celebrity are just as much wanting to be in connection as somebody that's like a fanboy or a fangirl, right? Like,
yeah.
In fact, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And I see this all the time. They just want to be in connection no matter what.
I met somebody and had known them for a while many years ago who was called the most hated person on the internet for a while, like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And they had sites dedicated to just talking crap about them. Like these people would gather on a daily basis. It was a forum.
Like a blog, right?
Yeah, it was and they would just talk about this person endlessly. And I'm like, you hate this person, right? Like that's what you're saying? And yet every single day you're building an entire community around hating this person. Okay. Right.
Take connection any way you can get it.
That's right. But that's right. That's staying in connection. So so that's a great example. All right. So the next piece is that we are going to, depending upon where the function falls for us, and this is part of it being in a system, there's a descending order of certainty that we have in our relationship with these functions. And that means that a person who has higher degrees of certainty will take more risks. This is how somebody who leads with extroverted sensing or sensation, we talk about this with Piper, who we suspect has ESFP preferences. She seems very clumsy. She's 12. She seems really clumsy. She's constantly covered in bruises. Like she's just, I hope nobody ever thinks anything terrible is happening to her home because we can't stop her. Like she's constantly running into things. She's constantly hitting herself, hurting herself, falling, tripping, the whole thing. And the reason why is because extroverted sensing or sensation is her first function. It's a dominant or driver. And she is a massive risk taker when it comes to her physicality. She's just always, she never does anything at normal speed. She's always full throttle. She's just running from thing to thing.
She doesn't do like a safety check.
She never does a safety check. Exactly.
I would do like 3 checks.
Yeah.
Before I do something. Right. She like, does it.
She just does it and, with predictable results. And one day she was just like, why do I hurt every day, Mom? Why is it every day that I'm like in pain in some way? Why can't I just have one day? And I'm like, well, kid, because you're running full throttle at everything, right? You just, in order to not have this level of pain, you're going to have to slow down. And she's like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm like, well, that's the answer. So we are risk takers when it comes to our first function. And that means that we might even appear to others in a clumsy way, if that makes sense. We might appear to be not as good at that as others. Now, as she ages, she'll get better because she'll have taken all these risks. She'll have learned the rules of what she can and cannot do with this function over time. But when we're young, we just kind of, it's like we just run full tilt at whatever it is that we feel certain in. And so that's a piece of it too. Whereas if a person has a function that's lower down, they'll feel very uncertain. So you might not see it come out in, it's going to come out in like very small little bits.
Yeah.
It's just going to, they won't feel permission. They'll throttle themselves from going full tilt. And then if they do have a negative response, then they're going to kind of snatch their hand back, so to speak. They're going to kind of go, oh, I shouldn't do that anymore. But what if somebody who has a function in an uncertain place happens to be raised in a context that very much encouraged them to get over that sense of uncertainty, that very much pushed them to get to a place where they have a lot more comfort, that they did learn similar lessons? Well, that person is going to show up very differently than someone who was reinforced to not go do things outside of their comfort zone. So health and unhealth, but then also development, right? Development is a major, major piece of this, and our age and all of those things come into all of this. So is the person creating all of this drama as an EFJ? Are they young? Are they in college, right? Are they a teenager? Are they in their 20s? Are they still trying to figure it all out? Do they feel a sense of certainty to create drama? Like they figure that anything that they mess up in a relationship, they can just later on figure it out. They'll just patch it up later. That would be the over certainty or overconfidence of extroverted feeling or harmony. I can't ruin a relationship enough to not be able to repair it, right? In the same way that Piper's like, I'm gonna run and jump over that chair, whether or not I know I can clear it, right? I just assume that I'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so that's a big piece of it as well. And then I think finally, and this is really important to remember, and I think we could probably do an entire podcast episode around this. There is a difference between using a function and honoring the wisdom of the function.
Yeah.
Honoring the wisdom of a function means that you are tapping into what one could call the reason it evolved in the first place. Like, why must this thing exist? Why is it so important for everybody to understand its wisdom, regardless of their personality type, regardless of where it falls for them, versus simply using a function? And those two things, those look different. Just using a function, I've got to, I need to know when it's time for me to sleep. So I have to tap into my sensing functions to tell me that. Does that mean that I'm understanding its wisdom, right? Its profound wisdom? Or is it just, I'm just used my sensing functions to let me know basic information? That's use versus wisdom. And so when a person is trying to figure out how is this person, how could they be using it, right? Like, how could they be using it if it's, if it's not in the way that it's described? Well, most of the time when we're describing a function, we're trying to get to its wisdom. We're trying to get to why it exists to begin with.
Yeah.
And that's why we named extroverted feeling, say, harmony, because it's getting closer to its wisdom versus just the use of it. So when you're learning functions in a silo, remember that you're getting to the heart of the matter as you're learning it. But when it's being played out, it's going to be played out at varying levels of understanding that wisdom. And so if a person does not understand the wisdom, even of their first or second function, they just don't understand the wisdom of it, they're just using it, that might also contradict how it's being taught, how the function is being learned, because that's trying to tap into wisdom.
Okay. So wisdom is holistic. I'm thinking about somebody who does use the function, and the way you're couching it is somebody that uses this, they have the function, they activate it, they use it. But what if they're using this and they're world class at it? So I'm just thinking about like some INTP. In fact, we have a friend that's an INTP coder, like brilliant genius person, right? Let's assume this person is like coding like crazy, or any INTP coding using their introverted thinking accuracy, and they become world class. Their computer code is very accurate. They understand how to create accurate code. They understand kind of what you're speaking to, the wisdom of the function. It's about accuracy. So they apply it to the thing that they're doing functionally. And maybe they're the best coder on the planet. What I hear you saying is that doesn't mean that the wisdom of introverted thinking or accuracy will go out of the silo of how it's being applied and then give them wisdom for the rest of their life unless they make that happen for themselves. It doesn't automatically just give them wisdom all throughout their life. Just because it's proficient or excellent doesn't equal maturity or wisdom.
Right.
Like excellence and proficiency don't equal maturity or wisdom.
Right.
They can,
yeah,
but they don't. That doesn't mean the same thing.
Right.
Wisdom and maturity happen. That's a separate thing that I could take this function and apply it toward. And,
right.
And there's wisdom to the accuracy function beyond just its proficient use.
Right. Yeah. A person can get very good at using a function and still not tap into its wisdom.
I mean, like world class, like they could be the best at it. It could be their driver.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
That's what we're talking about.
Yep. And until you tap into the wisdom, and we generally communicate or try to convey functions in terms of its wisdom. And I don't mean like us here at Personality Hacker. I mean, just in general.
Yeah.
That's how almost everybody tries to communicate the functions, is in like, why does this function have to exist? What is its wisdom? And I think that's really what when we're articulating about functions over and over and over again, and we're constantly circling drains and trying to put specific language and define and parse out and talk about this function versus this function and get really granular and try to like really like create these distinctions. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to figure out like, why must this function exist at all? What's the wisdom of it? Why do we need it? And how is it different than the wisdom of this other function that's similar to it?
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing to remember, is that the functions have a wisdom to them. That's really what we're trying to get to the heart of, because that's the goal, right? If I can tap into the wisdom of a function and I can imbue it inside of myself, I can integrate it, now I can level up. So when you are trying to understand a type, try to figure out, am I learning the wisdom of this function? Am I learning like all the ways in which it needs to exist and all the properties of it and why it's so important? Or am I trying to figure out how it's being used and how people tend to tap into it and how it tends to grow and express and all the different ways that it can show up? What level am I playing at here? And so if I say, extroverted feeling, which is harmony, blah, 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 which harmony more taps into its wisdom. And the person's like, well, I don't see that playing out in this person. It's like, well, because the person's not tapping into the wisdom of the function, but you're learning you're learning the function as if wisdom is imbued into it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know if that's a little bit of a word salad, but it's like there's a difference between people's use and the ability to understand the purpose of it. And most of us are unconscious around that. Most of us are just using our functions because they're the tools that we have. And we can get better over time. And that's actually what maturing is. Maturing over time is tapping into the wisdom. Development, going from unhealthy to healthy, is tapping into the wisdom, right? And so because of that, there's going to be lots of examples, lots and lots and lots of examples of people of a certain type, using these functions, but not using them in the way that you learned them, right? Not using them in exactly the way that you inculcated the information, because the information is going to bias towards its best expression and the purpose and the reason why it exists and all of that.
Also, I just want to let the person that's watching or listening right now know that we recorded an entire series about each of the 8 cognitive functions, why the world needs them. Mm-hmm. And we went deep into each one.
Yeah.
So we talk about what it does, why the world needs it, what does it represent in the world, all these things. I think it's a really good listen. So if you go back previous episodes, you can look through our catalog over personalityhacker.com and you can listen to that series. It goes really deep into each one of the functions. Yeah. I recommend it. So we talked about, let's just go through that list of 5 things again, kind of as we start to land the plane here.
Yeah. So the first one is that remember that the function is different than the user of the function, that there's going to be certain properties that are a part of descriptions of functions that are never going to play out exactly as you, or I mean, maybe they do, but for the most part, it's not the same thing. It's not the same beast. Functions do not exist in silos in reality. So how you're learning them in a silo, right? How you're learning them distinct from everything else. That there's always going to be messiness in the translation between the description of the function and how a person is using it. The second thing is that functions always operate in a system. So they're always being influenced by other functions.
So we learn them in a silo, but experience them in a system.
That's right. Exactly. You got it. And that's really crucial. And it's not just a system of other functions. It's also a system of a human being themselves and everything they're bringing to it. We are influencing our functions as much as we are being influenced by them. So we have to see it as a two-way street. We have to see that we're coloring these functions, not just being colored by them.
That's my biggest takeaway from today, by the way, is I'm realizing just how much we color this,
right,
as much as it colors us.
Yep, exactly. The next one is that development and health come in here. So there's seasoning we get as we age with use of our functions. We can see that. We can go, yeah, I'm not the same person I was when I was like 20 or whatever. And if you're like me and if you're at my age, then that's a long time ago, and you can see a lot of differences between yourself and 20. And how I use my extroverted intuition or exploration, say, is very different, right? I'm still the same person. I'm still using the function, and I still have a lot of similarities. But I definitely have tapped into new aspects, new capacities. I've kind of calmed down a bit. Like I used to be a lot more of like an Energizer Bunny style.
You used to be more certain when you spoke, weirdly enough.
Used to be way
more
way,
definitive,
way more.
and you this is how it works. Now you hedge your bets a lot more.
All the time.
People are like, well, she must not know what she's talking about. She hedges way more than she used to.
That's right. And it's a lot of depends, and it could be that, could be that. It's a lot more of that language than when I was younger and I just thought I knew everything. So for sure. So there's development, but then there's also health. And if a person is unhealthy, they actually may be doing the opposite of the description that you originally got for the function, because they're just trying to stay in the energy of the function. They're not necessarily, fulfilling its higher ideal. Like it just wants to be in the game. It doesn't matter if it's in a good or bad way. And so in some ways, if a person is unhealthy, they'll be manifesting almost the exact opposite of the description of the function. Well, I mean, in a 180-degree way, not in a unrelated way. It won't be, the function is all about taking care of people's needs. And then all of a sudden, in the unhealthy way, it doesn't want to be around humans. It'll still want to be around humans. It's just not taking care of anybody, right? Mm-hmm. And it's undermining as opposed to, say, supporting. In the case, we've used extroverted feeling or harmony as our test case the entire time. So let's stick with that one. So that one is usually supportive when it's healthy, and it's undermining when it's not. We've done entire podcasts on what it looks like when it goes bad or goes rogue or goes off the rails.
But it's not trying to mine and build buildings. Yeah. It's still focused on humans.
Humans, exactly.
It's just how is it focused on humans?
Exactly.
And the interactions between them.
That's right. Then another thing to remember is that depending upon where the function falls, it's going to take on different qualities and characteristics. And we talked about how, say, if it's a first function, it's very certain. And so there might almost be a clumsiness about it because of its certainty. Or even, I know somebody who has extroverted sensing or sensation as a dominant function, and they're not a good dancer at all.
I would say it's let's fix it in post energy.
Yeah.
More than clumsy. It's like, well, I can mess that up. I'll just fix it later because I know this function well.
That's right. Exactly.
That's kind of how it feels, right?
Yeah. And that they're willing to do things that they're not great at because they're.
It doesn't reflect uncertainty back.
That's right.
So I don't care. Like, I'm not uncertain about this. So I'm going to go and be silly around this. I don't care.
That's right.
It doesn't make me self-doubt.
Exactly.
I'm fine.
It's not undermining their ego at all. That's a great way of saying it. I know somebody who has extroverted sensing or sensation as a dominant driver function, and they are not good at dancing. Not because they couldn't be, but because they don't care and they never do it. But if you were to say you should get out on the floor and dance to the person, they go, okay. Like it's not that they're avoiding it. It's not like they think that they'll feel or look silly. It's just a lack of interest. They just don't care. And so unlike maybe other types that wouldn't get on the dance floor because it would make them feel very insecure or very vulnerable. That's not the thing with this person. And when they dance, it's not like they're a terrible dancer. It's just that's not their thing. And so they're clearly, they don't know what they're doing. But it doesn't, it at no point was it something that they would feel self-conscious around. They're not trying to convince anybody they're good at it. They're not trying to, they're not worried somebody will spot that they're bad. It just doesn't matter to them. And yet they're still leading with extroverted sensing or sensation. They've just applied it to different things. So that's also something that's a relevant piece of information. And then finally, there's a difference between using a function and tapping into its wisdom. And when we learn functions in silos, right, theoretically, we're usually trying to get to the heart of it. We're trying to get to that nucleus. We're trying to figure out what the wisdom of the function is. But most of the time when we're operating our type, or when we're just operating functions, we're just using them. We're not tapping into some major wisdom. So it's not always going to look like in this tidy, predictable, the grand purpose of this thing way. It's just going to, it's like I'm brushing my teeth, right? I'm not doing something like amazing. How does extroverted intuition people, how do they brush their teeth?
Well, they just don't brush teeth.
Yeah, they just don't. I just eat baking soda and I call it good, right? Like I'm just gonna brush my teeth. That's how I'm gonna be using it.
We use super soakers.
Yeah,
and just bleach each other's teeth from the other side of the room. Like stand still, Antonia.
It's very messy, but it
works.
Does it work? I don't know.
It's creative.
Right, exactly.
Very inventive way to clean your teeth.
Yeah. So Most of the time we're just using functions. They're not going to necessarily be this like grand poobah way of doing it. So that's the list. And if you can remember, if you can sort of lay the foundation of theory is not the same thing as reality. That's really what it comes down to, is theory isn't reality. And as you're learning functions, remember you are diving into the deep end of the theoretical pool.
Yeah.
You're like, that's where you're at. You're 100% in theory. And that's where you have to start. That's where we all start. That's how you get your sea legs. And as long as you stay in a theoretical space, which means that the only time you're really interacting or engaging with type is when you're like talking about it with other people and parsing definitions and trying to figure out is it this or is it this? Remember, that's still a theoretical game. So as long as you're staying in theory and in a theoretical game, things are going to, like, at first they're clarifying, but then they'll start getting confusing again. And you have to get out of the theoretical space and into what you like to say, Joel, and I think I'm warming up to the word, to a more operational space, meaning that you have to see it played out in reality. You have to make changes in your life based on this information and see how it works, right? How it parses out in the real world. And so as you're doing that, just remember, if things are confusing, it's just confusing because you are in the land of theory and nobody lives in the land of theory. Everybody lives in the land of reality. And as soon as you can figure that out, I think it makes understanding type a lot easier.
I think that's one key component of it. I think the other piece is just disconnecting behavior from cognition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's really what helps with that is behavior. If we looked at behavior as reality, it's not a one-to-one map of the cognition that caused that behavior. It's not an A equals B. It's a system running that creates the emergent of the system. And the system is the person, including their personality and their cognitive functions and the whole thing. So I think that's the systemic part you brought up earlier.
Well, it's that it informs our behavior.
Yeah.
But we have to figure out how.
Yes.
It's not a silver bullet. Like when you say when we say cognition isn't behavior, there is of course a very strong connection between the two. It's just not going to be
from the cognition side. You wouldn't want to start at the behavior side. I mean, okay. Point is separate the two. I'm not going to go into all the details of why I'm saying what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm saying the idea is to get a separation of these two and understand they're two different parts.
That's right.
They have distinction.
Yes.
I think that's what I'll leave everybody with. I don't want to confuse anyone right now and go deeper trying to explain something else. Just understand that cognition and behavior, while they have a very close relationship, are not the same thing.
They're not a one-to-one. That's right. Exactly.
I think that's the big idea here.
Yeah. Think of them more as, those puzzles where you've got two almost identical pictures, but you have to find like 10 different, 10 distinctions, right? What are these 10 differences between these two things? It's more like that, right? It's more like they're not exact. They might even look the same, but they're not exactly the same. You have to find the distinction between the behavior and the cognition.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to hear from you. We talked about this idea of separating out behavior from cognition. We talked a little bit about the difference between you and your personality type, right? And you as a person. Like you are not your type and your type is not you. You have cognition. You activate certain cognitive functions in your life and you'll bring those out to learn information, perceive your world, and make judgments or decisions based on information. But there's a lot of reasons why this is running. There's a whole system running. It's complex. And you can't just go, oh, well, I like to fill in behavior X, Y, Z and say, that must mean I have cognition A, B, C.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. So that's what we're going to leave you with. What's coming up for you? It's been me and Antonia talking. You've been here as part of this conversation, but there's been no mechanism for you to talk with us. You don't have a microphone. We're recording this asynchronously. So in order to hear from you, your job is to come over to personalityhacker.com. Directly below this episode, leave a comment, ask a question. More importantly, share your story. I think stories are great because they're compressed experiences. They show us where you're coming from. You can encapsulate a lot of life in a very short expression. So let us know where maybe you've gone through some understanding of this, where you're still confused, what questions you have. Maybe you had a big aha or learning around it. Like you realized, oh, wait, well, no wonder my mom does X, Y, Z. It has nothing to do with her cognition. It's because whatever reason, fill in the blank. I'd love to hear, and Tony would love to hear about it. come over, make your voice heard at personalityhacker.com.
Yep. And if you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to us in a lot of different places. There's opportunities for podcasts all over the place to subscribe. I believe Spotify is a big one. Apple Podcasts is another one. So find your preferred platform and subscribe to us there.
We release weekly.
Yes.
So you want to be subscribed. You can get a new episode every week when we post them.
Every Monday. And I don't think we've been late for a super long time.
Yeah.
So we're pretty consistent on Mondays. So subscribe and get. And
We've never been late. What are you talking about? Ever. Not once.
Not
Antonia.
once ever have we ever been late as UNPs, right? And then you can also watch us on YouTube. You might be watching the video podcast right now. You can subscribe. And then there is a bell option so that you are informed when new episodes come out. And as Joel mentioned, you can drop a comment there and let us know what you thought. And if you would leave a rating and review for us, that's my big ask. Whenever you leave a rating and a review, the review is the important one. Then we know that we're not just talking into the ether, right? It's not just, or ether rather, and we're not just throwing bottles with messages in them and they may or may not wash ashore. If you leave a rating and review, then we know you're listening and it gives us a little bit of oomph to record the next episode.
Absolutely. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker podcast.